Hey, what to readers? Okay, so as I'm drinking my turmeric tea, this is very healthy, thinking about this question of what will the United States do? What will Joe Biden have to do if he actually manages to win the election, right? If he manages to overcome the voter suppression and voters manage to be able to vote and they're not completely suppressed and trying to do mail-in vote and they're not undermined and Donald Trump doesn't shut down the post office or whatever it is he's going to try to do, or have, insta riots at the ballot spots, whatever he's going to do to try to win, because he's going to do anything he can to try to win. But let's say that Biden actually wins. Because right now, as of the day that we're recording this, as of the week that we're recording this, this particular podcast, Biden is up per the 538 averages in Arizona, North Carolina. He's tied in Ohio. He's up in Iowa. He's up in Wisconsin, Michigan. You see where I'm going? He's up in a lot of states, including all three of the swing Midwestern states that Donald Trump won. Pennsylvania, he's up in all of those states. He's even up in Florida. I'm not sure I believe that. There's one poll that has him up 6 points in Florida. Jason, we lived in Florida. I don't believe that for a heart. I don't believe that at all.
Not at all.
Unless he's up in Alabama too. I don't believe anything about what you say about Florida, because Florida is Alabama. It's just Alabama with palm trees. So I don't believe it. But I think he could be tied in Florida, and I don't think anybody's ever won Florida by more than 2 points. No matter, the only other Democrats who've won Florida are obviously Bill Clinton once and Barack Obama twice. But other than that, Democrats don't tend to do really well in the Sunshine State, the Gunshine State, as they call it. But let's just say that the polls are true and that Democrats can overcome the voter suppression, which is sure to come, and he actually wins. What will he inherit? I've been thinking about this a lot, just because, there is now a possibility. I was very cynical about the election prospect of the Democratic candidate, whoever it would be, against Donald Trump, because, Trump's base is so hardcore, they will crawl over broken glass to keep him in, because he is the guy who gives them the sort of supremacist vibe that they want, where it's their country and everyone else is an interloper and the country belongs to them. And, there is this sort of white South African National Party vibe to the Trump coalition. And so I figured, well, he's going to not lose a single voter. And Democrats are like, I don't really feel like voting today. And I wasn't feeling the vibe. And, Joe Biden just didn't move me. I'm not going to vote. Like, that's the difference between Democrats and Republicans. Republicans are like, who's running? Satan? Well, he's a Republican. I'll vote for him. They don't give a damn. And so that's the difference between the two parties. But let's just say that Biden overcomes all of that, and he manages to somehow win. And Susan Sarandon doesn't go, you shouldn't really vote for him. You should just vote for Jill Stein. And then that doesn't work, right? So this time, he wins. He's going to inherit a country in which we have lost our national standing, in which the word pity is being used to describe international feelings about the United States, in which the actual physical supply chains that American farmers, for instance, and steel industry rely on, right? We're out of the supply chains. This war with China, Donald Trump's little trade war, it has meant that other countries around the world are choosing to buy things like soybeans from Brazil instead of us, or from, China is sourcing a lot of its stuff from other countries now, and they're the biggest market outside of the European market, and they're emerging as the biggest market on earth. And they're just like, okay, bye, America, we're going to get our stuff elsewhere. That's why farmers are in record levels of bankruptcy. That's why you're seeing record, problems with American industries, even outside of the pandemic. And then the pandemic has forced the U.S. economy into basically a free fall. 40 million people out of work as of May. So we don't even know what it is as of the end of June. It could be 50 million. We're getting close to depression level economic catastrophe. Biden would inherit that. And the Federal Reserve, as much as Donald Trump keeps trying to force them, Jerome Powell, to game the system and make the economy look better, they're not doing it. They're like, no, we don't work for you. And no, the Federal Reserve is its own thing and we're not going to do it. And so they keep on doing the monetary policy the way they would normally do it. And they've already put their outlook out that the economy is going to get worse in the fall. The pandemic is going to get worse in the fall. So Biden will inherit an ongoing pandemic, a depression-level economy with 50 million, maybe 60 million people unemployed, a farm economy that is completely destroyed, racial tension that isn't even tension. Tension is like too nice of a word for it. A complete breakdown in racial relations, a policing situation that is as bad as it's been ever. And it's been bad. Remember, the police started out as the slave catchers. So it's been bad, but it's real bad right now. Bad as it's been since the 1960s. Russia recently came out and said they are concerned for human rights.
They need to start in their own country.
They're concerned for human rights as they watch the U.S. protests, says the Kremlin. This is I have to show it to you all. This is a real headline. Russia concerned for human rights as it watches U.S. protests, Kremlin says. Russia says it is concerned for the respect of human rights during the protests. Its own record on human rights has repeatedly come under scrutiny. No shit, Sherlock. Russia was accused of promoting unrest and provoking outrage in Moscow. They, what they do with their people who protest, they lock them in prison and then they never are seen again.
And they beat them.
Yeah, or they just disappear.
In the streets.
Yeah, they.
Oh, that's kind of like what we did over here a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly. Well, yeah. I mean, the only difference being that, if you try to stand up against the Kremlin, against the Putin government, your body might be found 100 miles from the Politburo. That isn't happening here yet, but we have had, we are again talking about lynching in America. There are at least 3 cases that are very questionable as to lynching. The Ahmaud Arbery case is very much a case that looks like a lynching, and that as you would describe lynching, that's what that is. It is, but not since the Harlem Renaissance has Russia been this effective at turning the tide on us in terms of accusing the United States of being the real human rights violator. Because, during the Harlem Renaissance, the Russians actively courted black intellectuals to say, hey, you should all come over here. They flew a lot of Russians over to Moscow, and they said, during the Harlem Renaissance, it's like, you should be thinking about being on our side because communism should be more attractive to you because it's more egalitarian.
You mean
and your country is racist?
Black folk over to
or brought
Moscow.
them over on steamships,
okay.
on fly. But yeah, not flying, but brought them over. Yeah, there were members of the Harlem Renaissance who went to Moscow, and they wined and dined them because they were trying to create increase the racial animosity in America by taking sides and claiming to take sides with black people, which is why Lejeune Bradford, a good friend of my mom's, the late Lejeune Bradford, Rita Lejeune Bradford. She was a great intellectual. She's the person who from whom I got the saying, "We are living in the age of primitive man." That was her saying. It was her catchphrase. We are living in the age of primitive man. When she was young, she was a communist. She was born in 1930. She grew up in the 30s. She was a communist when she was at the University of Chicago because for her and for a lot of young black radicals, the communists were the ones who were egalitarian on race, and the capitalists and capitalism was the enemy of the black man and woman. Because, of course, capitalism is where slavery emerged from. So there were a lot of sort of leanings toward communism and openness to the idea of it. And Russia stoked that all the way through the 1960s, where they tried to make the case that the United States was the real violator of human rights. The United States was the villain, and Russia, communist Russia, was the good guy. And they tried to make this case all the way through the Cold War. All the way through the Cold War, Russia consistently tried to make the case that we are the bad guy. And to this day, there are people who are on this horseshoe spectrum of left and right who definitely seem to believe Russia is the better actor than we are. You see them in the media. I will not name them because I'm not trying to get in Twitter wars with some of these people, but they seem to believe that Cuba, Russia, that there's a far left, far right sort of matrix of horseshoe people who do say, you know what, we're the bad guy and Russia is not. And so that's a thing that's always existed, and Russia has stoked that and tried to stoke it. Well, fast forward to Donald Trump coming along. And Donald Trump, who in a sense, the alt-right, quote unquote, is also a horseshoe kind of phenomenon. They try to appeal to the farthest far left, and they sort of push them off into the Jill Stein direction. They try to appeal to the farthest far right, the fascist sort of neo-Nazi people, all the way that spectrum. And they essentially say that Russia is the model for what this country should be. Russia is a white ethno-state. So if you're a alt-right person, you think Russia is the good guy because they're a white ethno-state, and they put down any Muslim uprising with extreme dispatch.
But they're concerned about what's going on over here.
But exactly. Russia is a violent oligarchy. It is a kleptocracy. in which very, very rich people exploit everyone else. They don't have any human rights. Russia is not in any way a good guy. Russia is not. But the problem with the narrative that we are creating now under Trumpism is that it's not clear we're the good guy either. And so you now have a world, after World War II, Stalin helped us win World War II. It was Russia and us fighting on the same side. And then Russia and the U.S. divided the whole European world up. And the influence, race to have influence over this new world after World War II is what the Cold War was. It's why we both were racing to get to space first. It's why we were both, racing to have nuclear weapons first. Like, this was the thing. And the division of the world between the Russian sphere of influence and the American sphere of influence, that is what the Cold War is. The United States won that battle all the way up through the fall of the Berlin Wall. They were brittle and they fell apart because communism is really not a workable solution, nor is kleptocracy, which is what Russia descended into after the USSR fell. But now we have a kleptocracy. We have a kakistocracy. We have an oligarchy. We just don't have a system that's defensible. That's my dog barking. We just don't have a system that's defensible in the world cleanly against Russia's system. And so, when you talk about what Russia wanted and why they were so into Donald Trump, it's not because they respect Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants and craves the respect of Vladimir Putin. He craves it. He wants him to basically be his new dad. He sort of falls at the feet of this man. But Russia doesn't respect Donald Trump. If you look at the way Russian media talks about him, they don't respect him. What they want is that he's the chaos agent that would make their case against us, that they can win belatedly the war of ideas between America's system and the Russian system belatedly by having a complete chaos agent in power in America that will exacerbate racial tension, exacerbate economic tension, exacerbate the economic fall and the crushing of the working man, that will exacerbate all the bad things, that the sort of side effects of capitalism that are not egalitarian, and that will make it worse, that will reject immigrants, that will reject Muslims, that will make us a chaotic country that no other country can rightly respect. Donald Trump has given them that. He's given them really everything they could have possibly wanted. So if Biden becomes president, Biden not only has to rebuild the U.S. economy, he has to rebuild the supply chain, which is not easy. When you start buying from someone else, it's not like you're just going to come back and be like, okay, we'll buy from America. The supply chains have moved on without us. Has to rebuild our power in the world, our soft power. The ability of Barack Obama to fly to Egypt and give a speech in Cairo about human rights. That's soft power. He could do that because Barack Obama was seen as a moral actor. Trump could never do that. And Biden is going to have to find a way to rebuild that, our stature, the respect for us, the respect for our system, the belief that our system is fundamentally good. That's going to be a hell of a job on top of having to save a destroyed economy. So I almost kind of feel sorry for Joe Biden, who's wanted to be president for a really long time. And now that he's on the cusp of actually getting it, the job he will inherit is even harder than the job Barack Obama inherited. Because Barack Obama inherited the Bush disaster economy, but he didn't inherit all that other stuff because people still they were angry at George W. Bush for doing the Iraq War. George W. Bush tested the world's patience and the world's belief in us by invading Iraq. It was a big test. Lucky for him, he had England dragged along behind him, so he wasn't alone as the villain. But he tested the ability of the rest of the world to believe in us, this coalition of the willing where they punished people who wouldn't help them invade Iraq. He tested it really with torture, with Gitmo. He pushed it far. We were torturing folks under George W. Bush, so he pushed it. So Barack Obama had to rebuild trust in this country because of Iraq, because of the economic disaster, and just because of the lies and the torture over that war. And now take that and triple it with what Trump has done. Because Trump hasn't had a war yet, but he's completely dismantled the whole case for America in the world. Completely. He's dismantled people's belief in us completely. Poor Joe Biden. Because he might actually win. That's not going to be fun. So we want to talk I've got great guests coming on today. Jason, this should be a good one because...
Should be a real good one.
This should be a good one because these are two of the people who are the smartest on this subject of what Russia wanted and why it did what it did in 2015, 2016 in order to get Donald Trump in office. So let's bring him in. All right, and joining me now, this is going to be a fun one. I joined now by two people who you are very used to seeing on MSNBC. You see them all the time, but not like this. They are now both officially beardos. Who knew? David Corn, Michael Isikoff, or Michael Isikoff and David Corn, because I like to be even Steven. So either of you could be first or second in the nomenclature. David and Michael, thanks for being here.
Yes, and I would like to point out that I grew my beard first.
I am happy to concede that because I think they both look bad, so he had a bad idea first.
They're both, no, I like them. I think they're very distinguished. You guys both look like the two coolest college professors like on campus. You both look like you're teaching a course in experimental history somewhere on an obscure liberal campus on the left coast. Well, thank you guys for being here. So we're going to talk about, and I'm excited to have you guys on to talk about Russian roulette, the New York Times #1 best-selling book. I'm going to hold up my copy. My copy is defective because it doesn't have the words New York Times #1 bestseller on it because it's not the paperback. You guys now have a paperback coming out, which is very exciting, and it actually signifies, somebody's trying to call me, it actually signifies your bestseller. So congratulations on that, first of all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those who are unfamiliar with it, Russian roulette tells the story of the war that Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin waged on America and the election, of course, the result, the election of Donald Trump. What is new in the new book? I'll start with you, Michael. What's new in the new book?
Well, we have a new epilogue about the impeachment battle and an interesting insight into it. Perhaps not surprising, but useful to explore a little. What was Donald Trump doing the morning of his fateful phone call with President Zelensky of Ukraine? Well, he was watching Fox News all that morning. The phone call takes place at, I think, 9:03 a.m. Up until that moment, he is glued to the TV set in the White House residence, watching Fox News, getting fired up because it was the day after Robert Mueller had testified. Mueller, as you well recall, did not do very well. Democrats were hoping that Mueller would give life to his report and, increase the momentum for impeachment of the president. And what's Trump's first takeaway from the coverage on Fox and Friends of the Mueller testimony? Impeachment, it's over. He's won. He's reveling in what he views as his triumph. But instead of resting there, he wants what Tom Bossert, his former Homeland Security advisor, called his pound of flesh. He wants to go after the people who put him through the Mueller experience. And one other data point that's worth pointing out that morning that inspired some of Trump's comments to Zelensky, he gets new polling information out that very morning at 7 a.m. that he was trailing Joe Biden by up to 8 points in Ohio, a crucial battleground state he has to carry in order to win re-election. So if you have those two data points about Trump that morning, the reveling about Mueller's poor performance and the new poll numbers show he's losing to Biden in Ohio, it explains a lot about what took place during that phone call with Zelensky that led to his impeachment.
Yeah, and the panic, the clear panic, David, that Donald Trump feels about Joe Biden. Because, I mean, if there is the sort of worst case scenario, if you're Donald Trump and you ran as a fake populist, but you actually were born with $317 million in the bank and then lost it $900 million and then got Russians to loan you more money. Like, the worst case scenario is that you run against a regular Joe, which literally Joe Biden is. And so he's obviously scared of him. But I wonder about his other fears, because it feels like Donald Trump, yes, he is intimidated by the idea of running against Joe Biden, so he does all of this horrible stuff in Ukraine. But he also seems to be afraid of or beholden to, I think most people would agree, Vladimir Putin. Is Donald Trump afraid of Vladimir Putin?
Well, I'm not sure he's afraid of him. I think he wants his admiration. I think he adores Putin and wants to be accepted into the strongman's, club around the world. It's not just him, but it's Erdogan in Turkey, Duterte in the Philippines. But there are two sides to this, right? Donald Trump is insecure about many things, but in this case, two things. He's worried about Joe Biden and losing his reelection. He's also worried constantly about the taint on his presidency. That is that he got elected in 2016, as the book shows, with help from Russia. Russia was helping him throughout the campaign. Now, whether he would have won without that help, we can debate until the end of time. But it was a close election. Russia did help him, and he aided and abetted the Russians by denying it was happening, basically going along with the Russian attack. And so what we see when he talks to Zelensky, there are two things on his mind, right? One is to gin up phony investigations against Joe Biden, and the other is to basically bolster this wacky, nutty conspiracy theory that the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, was not hacked by the Russians, and that somehow Ukraine was behind it, and that they ended up taking the servers from the DNC and hiding them so no one would know this. It was like, basically the theory is that this was all made up, was all a hoax to set up Russia to make Trump look bad, and that Russia didn't hack the DNC. And so those are the two things he wants from Zelensky. Get rid of Biden for me, but also, more importantly, come up with this, this crazy notion, support this crazy notion that Russia did not attack 2016 campaign, and that way there's nothing illegitimate about my presidency.
Well, but you know why I'm asking you that, David? Because there's a something that I learned about from you, which is Christopher Steele and the Steele memo. You guys write about Christopher Steele quite a bit in Russian Roulette. And, there's a lot of question about what Russia has on Donald Trump. Is it that they've got financial stuff on him, that they know about his finances, or something that involves pee? Okay, let's just be honest. Dude, have you guys done the investigation? You guys can both answer this, but I'll start with you, David. Does he fear that Russia's got something on him that could humiliate him in America?
I think it's not necessary. I really don't believe that he feels like they're going to do him in. They could have done a couple, there are a couple of things that could be going on here. And I think, from 2013 on, he has said publicly he wants to be Putin's best friend. He admires him. He wants to be accepted by Putin. Now, in the book, we come up with a timetable that makes it seem unlikely that the whole peace story, is legitimate. And even Christopher Steele himself says, maybe 50-50, but, coming from him, I would discount it even further. But I think he wants something from Putin. He wants to be admired by Putin. And so I don't think he's doing what he does or has done out of fear that the Russians will somehow reveal something about him. I don't think they need to blackmail him. If you have a puppy dog who wants your affection, you don't have to use the stick.
Yeah.
So, there may be, they've been looking at prominent Americans for years. He's been going to Russia back and forth for decades. He's bragged about what he did with women there, according to friends of his over the years. So they may have something on him, but I don't think it's needed.
Yeah. What about Michael Isikoff? What about Mike? What about Lindsey Graham?
Well, let's all right. I just want to say a few more words about the Christopher Steele matter, because we did write a lot about in the hardcover. And I thought we took a very measured view of the Steele dossier based on our reporting at the time. But in the new epilogue, we made clear that it does not hold up. The new findings from the Inspector General report really undercut the credibility of those documents. And, look, these were memos that got a lot of circulation from the media. media, including cable TV, including MSNBC TV. And I think at this point, it's fair to say that some of those allegations have not borne out. The media overdid it, and that's given material for Trump's allies to attack the overall legitimacy of the Russia investigation. We don't believe it does. We believe that the Russia investigation, based on the totality of the evidence, was more than justified for the FBI to start looking into in the summer of 2016. But did some of the allegations go too far? Yes, they did, and we should all own up to that.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about the Steele dossier, which of course not meant for public consumption, and of course, as has been found by the Inspector General, did not trigger the Trump-Russia investigation, right, as conservatives like to say, is that even recently it came out, although the FBI and the intelligence community discounted a lot of the particulars, they also said that, in October and in June of 2016, when he pointed to a Russian plan to help Trump get elected, that was consistent with what the intelligence community later discovered. Yep. So in a big picture way, he was onto something. He wasn't out there, making hay out of this publicly, and it wasn't what led to the FBI investigation. But a lot of the particulars, it was gossip and heard from hearsay, yeah, and that did not bear out. But I do think he still gets some degree of credit for identifying in June of 2016 that the Russians were trying to help Trump. Yeah. That's a pretty big deal.
It's a big deal because, so the thing about this president being the first president, I'm pretty sure in American history, to be elected with the help of a foreign government, this was the thing that the founders most wanted to avoid, was having foreign interference in our government. I wonder if, from both your point of view, Michael and then David, Russia kind of won this. I mean, they got the president they wanted, whatever nefarious tricks they pulled. We now have utter chaos in the United States that they are boasting about. We have a president that's completely beholden to Putin, like he's his daddy, like he's his replacement for his father. You have a reset. You have a chapter in the book that's, this is the real reset of the Western world. Well, that's happened. We are no longer close allies with our allies. And Trump is trying to realign us with North Korea, Saudi Arabia, and Russia as our best friends. It feels like Russia won this round of the Cold War.
I certainly don't disagree with any of that. But I think first and foremost, even beyond electing Donald Trump, I think the Russian goal was to sow discord in the United States, to pit us against each other. If you look at those social media postings they were doing surreptitiously through all these phony trolls in St. Petersburg and bots, they were working all sides. They were promoting Black Lives Matter. They were promoting white supremacists. They were stirring the pot left and right. Could look at Donald Trump's America and the degree to which we are perhaps more divided than we've been in decades. You probably have to go back to Vietnam War era to find a period when there's been this much civil strife and discord within the American body politic. In that sense, the Russians got everything they wanted, and they are still reveling in it.
Yeah. And David, I guess the question would be, is what more do they want? Because it seems like they won in the sense that they got the discord and the chaos president that they wanted. So that's the check one for them. But they didn't get a couple of specific things like sanctions relief, because that seems to have been a part of the goal, right? Trump he's exercising extraordinary power, more than a lot of presidents do, rolling over the Constitution, but he hasn't been able to do that. So is that the end game in a lot of ways? If he gets back in, is that the end game?
Well, one thing they got was there was a push when he came into office for there to be even stricter sanctions, which you write about in the book. And he said no to that. He kind of stuck with some degree of sanctions, and Congress forced him to adhere to, I would call, mid-level amount of sanctions. Although we see, what did he do 3 weeks ago? Can't even remember now. There's like 20 outrages a day. But in the middle of the protests, when he wasn't talking to the American public, he called Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Had a nice conversation with him. This was before he sent the troops into Lafayette Square, or Bill Barr did. Yeah. And out of that, what came out of that meeting, that Trump wants to invite Putin back into the G7, make it back to the G8, and have him come visit. This was on the table. Come visit Washington in September. This September, when the G7 is supposed to come to America. So you think about it. Here's a guy who attacked the election in 2016. Donald Trump has denied over and over again that it really happened or that it made a difference. And he refuses to talk publicly about the fact that the FBI director, Chris Wray, and his director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, each say that Russia is intervening or trying to intervene again. And so he's inviting this guy back weeks before the next election, having never, ever resolved what happened in 2016. So I think in that way, yes, they haven't gotten everything they wanted in the economic front, but they have America tearing itself apart. They have us being completely ripped apart by this pandemic that Trump has ineptly handled. In the meantime, he's, unlike anybody else in the G7, he's saying, let's bring Vladimir Putin back in, even though there are still European sanctions against Russia for the invasion of Ukraine. Yeah. So they've gotten a fair bit here, I think. Yeah. Much more than I think they could have expected.
Yeah, they did probably better than they ever expected. Let's talk a little bit about, and I'll jump back to Michael on this. What do you make of what really appears to be the leadership of the military finally belatedly saying no and seeming to push back? The institutions that Donald Trump has managed to corrupt over the course of 4 years have been pretty extraordinary. The State Department, he's corrupted the Pentagon. He's tried to corrupt the military by putting soldiers up in his hotels. He's trying to corrupt every aspect of government. Finally, you're starting to see the military step up. Is that something unprecedented? Yeah.
I think it's highly significant and it's infectious. I mean, if you look at how this has evolved, where increasingly people in the military, retired and current, have been distancing themselves from the president in ways that were inconceivable just a few months ago. You had, I think it was First Admiral Mullen, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, sending out a very powerful statement a few weeks ago opposing what took place in Lafayette Square and opposing the use of the active military. And that seems to have inspired or pressured James Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense, who has famously held his tongue since leaving office about serving this president, to break loose and put out that extraordinary statement that made it, he viewed some of what the president was doing as a violation of the Constitution and the oath to which he and other military members have sworn. And, then that's followed by people like General Milley, the current chairman, saying he was sorry he went to that church with the president. So I think that there's been building momentum here in which the military is increasingly making it clear there are limits about how far they will go in following this president. And of course, we've had all the speculation about what might happen if the president loses re-election and somehow refuses to accept his defeat, and would he leave the office? I think it's pretty clear on what side the American military will be if such a thing happens.
Yeah, that's the one sort of hopeful thing, that it does feel like the military is like, no, it's a no. David, let's talk about another person that's got a book out that features in this whole story, which is John Bolton. John Bolton, who declined to testify in the impeachment of Donald J. Trump, now wants us to read his testimony in a book he's selling. I refuse to do that. What do you make of that?
Well, the interesting thing is he's, I think in the press release that came out prior to the book's publication, he teased his case and said, you know what, the House Democrats made a big problem. They only kept impeachment limited to Ukraine. There are so many other impeachable offenses. Well, John, why didn't you come forward and outline them for people? I mean, if he believes that there's a man sitting in the office who committed multiple impeachable offenses, and he considers himself a patriot, a hawk, someone who defends the Constitution, then regardless of whether he has a book coming out, I would think that he'd have an obligation to come forward as a whistleblower and say, well, this is what I know about Ukraine, but hey, guys, I've got a whole bunch of other things here you got to know about.
Yeah.
And he did not do that. And now he's trying to make it seem as if the Democrats botched impeachment because they just kept to Ukraine.
Yeah.
It's really pretty low for a person who was National Security Advisor, who took an oath of office to defend the United States, to take this attitude. So, I'm looking forward to reading all the, I would say, I think we should read all the revelations, but at the same time, I don't want to put any money in his pocket.
Exactly. And he's not invited on what to read. I want to go through. Let's talk about Michael Flynn. Michael Isikoff, you've got an interview that you reproduce in Russian Roulette, a testy interview that you did with General Flynn, in which you question him about this notorious din-din that he had, or his relationships with RT, the Russian propaganda channel, in which he didn't seem to enjoy the interview very much. What do you make of the fact that Donald Trump is not a man who believes in mercy particularly, but he seems to want to dole it out to people that he thinks, I guess, I don't know, that could testify against him in a criminal trial. I don't know what it is. What do you make of his attempt to get Flynn off the hook?
I think the more I read the testimony about Flynn, the more you connect all the dots. And I've increasingly come to the conclusion that this may be the one case that we know of where Donald Trump may actually feel guilty, because guilty about his own conduct. Because if you sort of follow the bouncing ball about Flynn's false statements to the FBI, what happens? It's in January 12th, I believe, is when David Ignatius of the Washington Post first reports that Flynn had these conversations with Ambassador Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. And then Donald Trump erupts. If you read carefully the Mueller testimony, Trump erupts and demands that the story be killed. He wants the story killed, that his incoming national security advisor, he hasn't yet taken office, was having these conversations with the Russian ambassador to undermine what the president at the time, Barack Obama, had just done. So Flynn gets the message that he's supposed to kill the story, leading to his lies first to Vice President Pence and then to the FBI. He's doing what the boss wanted. Trump knows that. Trump knows that Flynn, by lying, is doing exactly what he asked be done: kill the story. And then when he learns that that Flynn is now in trouble and could be charged criminally for lies to the FBI, he makes that extraordinary appeal to Comey to ask him to take it easy on Mike Flynn, leading to the firing of Comey, leading to the appointment of Mueller. So, my own theory on this is Trump knew he was responsible for everything that Flynn did. Of course, Flynn didn't have to do exactly what the boss wanted, but he did. And therefore, that sort of led to everything that followed.
Yeah, but
I think Mike gives Trump maybe too much credit, because if you look at what happened.
The one case I said.
You look at what happened to Michael Cohen.
Was going to say that. Thank you.
He didn't seem to feel any compunction there about watching that guy go off to jail, who buried lots of bodies for Trump over the years. Yep. I tend to think, it's hard for me to imagine Trump feeling guilty. We do know that Trump has, an obsession with revenge. And the enemy of his enemy is his friend, and he just wants to just go after whatever enemies he can get. And so I think he saw, Flynn, he had no trouble jettisoning Flynn initially publicly and saying he lied, he's out, and firing him. But now that he sees Flynn fighting with Mueller, what he cares about most is discrediting the Mueller investigation. And if he can do anything to muddy up the waters there and get behind Flynn, I think that's probably what's driving him. He wants to take the Mueller investigation, which he considers the full Russian investigation, and just grind it into nothingness, and like he does with Obama, take away everything that it might have accomplished.
Well,
and I think so. And we may see that come to pass with Roger Stone as well, because he's dangled the idea of a pardon out there. Hasn't happened yet, but it might.
You know what? I think the verdict here is that David and I are team cynical, and Michael's too nice. Way too nice. with that beard, you're supposed to be sinister. You're supposed to be sinister we are.
I can't have that mark on my record. That's just,
okay, we'll take it back. We'll cut that
shameful.
part out. No, we're not going to cut that part out. So let's talk about pardons. Just from all the research that you guys did, and Russian Roulette is a must-read. If you're the lexicon of books that you need to read to understand what happened. Obviously, Malcolm Nance has a couple of really great books on this. You guys, Russian Roulette. This book is critical, I think, to read, so you need to understand how we got here so that we don't get here again. But one of the questions that, all these characters that you guys go through, that you talk about, Manafort, Stone, Flynn, of these people, who would be the most beneficial for Donald Trump to pardon? Who do you think is the most likely to get a pardon, starting with the very nice and very kind and very generous Michael Isikoff?
Yeah. All right. Oh, God, you're killing me here, Joy. I will not be surprised if they all get pardoned after the election. That's traditionally when presidents issue controversial pardons, and in this case, I would not be surprised if Manafort, Stone, Flynn, if he still needs one, will all be pardoned. Look, there's very little constraint on Donald Trump's conduct. Even under the best of circumstances. Look, the importance of the Mueller report, leave aside what it said about Russia, is in volume 2, where they outline the obstruction actions by the president, clearly shows the president's willingness to violate all established norms of behavior for public officials. The idea, we've had ingrained in this country's political culture since Watergate the importance of the independence of law enforcement, of the Justice Department, no political interference in investigations, in criminal investigations. But Trump showed no compunction about breaking through those barriers. It's, whether it added up to indictable cases of obstruction of justice is, doesn't matter. What it does show is that there were no constraints on Donald Trump's behavior. And we've seen that time and time again under his presidency. The evidence in the Mueller report is a foreshadowing of so much else that would follow, including the Ukraine experience and much else. So I don't think there'll be any constraint on Donald Trump's use of pardons after the election. And that's why I would not be at all surprised if all of them get pardoned.
The most interesting pardon, I think, should it come to pass, would be the one of Roger Stone. And why is that? That's because Roger Stone's crimes, lying to Congress and intimidating a witness, tie back to him covering up for Donald Trump. This is one aspect of the story that I don't think has gotten a lot of attention, in part because it was redacted out of the Mueller report when it was first released. But it's clear, and it came out in Stone's trial, that the Trump campaign, including Trump himself and Manafort, tried to use Stone as a conduit to WikiLeaks, while WikiLeaks was being used by the Russians, or working with the Russians, to disseminate the material that the Russians had hacked from the Democratic Party, from other Democratic players. And so they were trying to hook up or at least find out what WikiLeaks was doing, what they had. They were, this was, what's Trump's big tell? Whenever he obsesses about saying he didn't do something, it means he did it. So he spent all these years saying no collusion. The Mueller report, when you get behind those redactions and you see what came out in the Roger Stone trial, indicates that they kind of tried to collude, at least with WikiLeaks, to coordinate, find out what they had, and Stone lied to keep that covered up. And in the interview that Trump did with Mueller, which was not face-to-face, it was only written questions, he was asked, did you have any conversations with Roger Stone about WikiLeaks and the release of materials?
Yeah.
Or anyone else in your campaign did this? And he said no. He said, I don't remember. During many conversations, nothing like this. Now, that's pretty close to him just breaking the law by lying to a special counsel.
Yeah.
So Stone and he are tied up in nefarious action more so than the Manafort case or the Flynn case. So if he pardoned Stone, in a way, Trump pardoning himself.
And this is, I have to ask you guys, we are running out of time. I have to ask you guys for a one-word answer. One-word answer based on what you guys have done in all your investigative reporting acumen. I'll start with you, David. Does anybody in this administration, up to and include Donald Trump, go to jail based on what they've done in the next 2 years?
God.
What do you think?
I'm not predicting what's happening in the election. I'm not predicting what's happening after the election. The only thing I'll predict is that Russia will try to do something again, as may well China and other actors.
It comes down to you, Michael Isikoff. Does anybody go to jail? Just based on I know you guys are not lawyers. I don't think you're lawyers.
I think Stone is due to go to jail before the election, and I don't see anything that's going to stop that. But after the election, all bets are off.
Well, if they do, you guys can write another book. Michael Isikoff and David Korn, Russian Roulette, the inside story of Putin's war on America and the election of Donald Trump, now out in paperback. With a New York Times #1 bestseller stamp on the cover, which means you have to buy it. Thank you guys so much for being here. Really appreciate you both, and your beards are fabulous.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, guys, have a great one.
Thanks, Joy. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye.
guys, thank you so much. Bye. That was fun. Thank you guys so much. Thank you very much to Michael Isikoff, David Korn, Russian Roulette. I don't need the paperback because I already read this. You can see that I enjoyed it a lot because it's all dog-eared and I put like little things in it so I don't fold down all the pages like I normally do in a book. You can't borrow a book from me. It's not even a good idea because it's all dog-eared usually, but this one is safe. So thank you guys for joining us and hope you guys will pick up the paperback, support these guys. They do a lot of good work. We'll see them again.
You notice everybody's rocking a Corona beard.
The Corona beard is awesome.
Yeah.
You even have a Corona beard, Jason.
I do, but I won't show you.
No one can see you. Yeah,
no,
no one
not
can see
yet.
you. You're like one of those, you're like Charlie in Charlie's Angels.
Yeah, I'm the voice behind the screen.
You're the voice behind the screen, but you too have a Corona beard.
I do.
Yeah. I cannot grow a fine mustache or a Corona beard.
No, you can't.
It would be weird.
Very.
It would be very weird. So I'm going to not do that. I can't even do it anyway. It's not like I could. I could paste one on. I could put a false mustache.
That'd be weird too.
A false mustache might actually be the hottest thing ever. That might actually, it'll be a hit.
Hey, it could be act as a mask.
Yeah, that could be my mask, my false mustache.
Nice,
all right,
thick Billy D. Williams.
A Billy D. Williams thickums,
Yeah,
a thickums
exactly.
beard. I'll do a thickums. All right, we're gonna consider that maybe for the next What to Read.
Hey guys, don't forget to subscribe.
Don't forget to subscribe. Hit that little thing. It's like a bell.
Notification.
The notifications. I always
Yeah.
forget the name of it. Hit the notification if you're watching this on the YouTubes. You can also, because that way you're going to never miss one, because you don't want to miss one. We have so many good ones coming up, so many great people who are coming up. You don't want to miss any of it, so please hit subscribe
Or if
so you
you're
never miss
driving in
it.
a car, everybody, you can always download it, Apple,
That's true. But don't do it while you're driving.
Spotify. No, you do
Wait
it
till you
before
stop.
you drive.
Yeah, before you drive. Before you leave your house, then you can download it. You can hit Spotify. You can do it on Apple iTunes. It's everywhere. We can be audio. We can be visual. You know, if you have to see my face, you can do it on YouTube. You get it anyway, because you know what? And also our Lipson family, we have to give you guys a shout out as well. Thank you all for being here. Please put some comments below. We'd love to hear what you think. Give us some ideas of people that you think that I should interview on this fine podcast. Jason, do you have any ideas of people I should interview on this? I'm sure you do.
I have a whole bunch of ideas,
Tell
but
me
let's
later.
leave them all as about a surprise.
All right, leave them at
Oh, don't forget, we have to wish our son Jamar happy birthday.
Oh, okay. So on the day that this is recording, this is the 23rd birthday of Jamar
Happy
Kenyemi
birthday.
Reid, actor extraordinaire. You'll soon be seeing him in all the movies and such because he's an actor and he's
Happy
a good
birthday,
one.
son.
And also you can see him on TikTok.
All the time.
Hilarious. He's hilarious on TikTok. Does he have a name on TikTok? I don't even know what it is. I don't even know how
sure
TikTok works.
he doesn't want us to tell all our old people to go check his TikTok.
That's true. That's true. But you know what? Hey, subscribers are subscribers.
Hey,
we want y'all to subscribe too. Please subscribe. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you on the next What to Read. Be good. Grow a fabulous beard. And goodbye.
Bye, fam.
Getting more chills, lyrically it's more skills. So what you saying is, can't defeat the demons that you're playing with. It's real life, never mics. Kid it going, steady flowing, chase balls, curse on the beat, and we out like